Hey, this is Henry, and welcome to today's tutorial. What we're going to be doing today is we're going to learn how to deploy our PERN Stack application to Heroku. You can see here that this is going to be our PERN to do app, which I have over here. So I'm just going to clone it, and I'm going to configure it so it can get ready to be deployed to Heroku. Now, by all means, you can apply this to any of your PERN apps, but I actually much prefer you guys to first deploy this PERN to do app with me. So just to make sure we're on the same page. And also, if you do face an error, at least you can use this video as reference to see what may be the problem. All right, and then also feel free to check out the PERN Stack tutorial if you're interested in making this PERN to do app. But anyway, there is going to be some prerequisites, or really just pre-setup, if you will. So the first thing we're going to need is going to have the Heroku CLI installed to our computer along with Git. And then also we're going to need to have a PERN app that's going to be ready to get deployed. So again, I actually much prefer you guys to first deploy this PERN to do app before you start to deploy your other PERN apps. But of course, that's your preference. So in the next section, yeah, let's get started and start deploying this thing. Okay, so time for us to start deploying this application. As you can already see over here, I already git cloned my PERN stack to do from my GitHub repository, and I already installed the packages for both my client and my server folder. Okay, so what we're going to be talking about in this section is file structure and where your .git folder should be located at. Okay, so let's first talk about .git. So your .git folder should actually be located inside the root directory. Root directory just simply means, well, directory meaning folder and root meaning top level, so it means top level folder. So if you look inside here, my PERN Heroku would be my root directory because it's containing my client and my server folder. Okay, so we're going to need to have the .git folder inside here. Some of you guys are not going to see that, and in order to actually reveal it, we can go inside our root directory over here, and we can just simply say ls-a, and this is going to reveal us the hidden folders and the regular folders. So you can see, indeed, we do have a .git. Now, some of you guys may not see this, and that's perfectly fine. All you have to do is just do git init, and that's going to initialize git. All right, so you're going to make that .git stuff inside. And also, make sure you don't have a .git within your client or your server folder. All right. Now, with that out of the way, let's talk a little bit about file structure. Now, the thing about Heroku is that it's not strict on the way you should structure your files. In fact, it's actually really flexible on it, but it does demand one thing, and it's that you must have a package.json file inside the root directory. You must have a package.json file inside the root directory, and this is actually missed by a lot of people, because some people will just put the React application in the client folder and then put their Express app in the server folder, and then they try to deploy it, but they're going to face errors. And the reason is because Heroku doesn't see a package.json. So the package.json is essentially instructions for Heroku. So if it doesn't see that, it's not going to deploy for you successfully. So there's actually many methods into revealing your package.json. So in our case, we're going to reveal the server package.json. And what we're going to do is basically take all the server code from the server folder and just putting inside the root directory. And that should actually reveal our package.json. Okay, so let's just kind of do that right now. So I'm just going to open my folder where it's located at, and I'm just going to go inside here. You can see that this is my server folder over here, and I'm just going to simply take all of this and just put it inside my root directory right here. And you can see that indeed everything moved inside there instead. And what I can just simply do is just delete my server folder because it should be empty. Let's just double check that. Yeah, it's empty now, and that should be our structure files. Okay, so this satisfies for Heroku because now it can see this package.json. All right, so what I'm just going to simply do is just say git add, and I'll just say git commit, put server code in root directory. All right, cool. So that's really the first step. So what we're going to be doing in the next section is we're going to start configuring our main server file. So I'll see you guys in the next section. Okay, so time for us to start focusing on our index.js file, or really just our main server file. So I did this behind the scenes where I created a build folder. Don't worry too much about it, but I'll explain real soon what exactly this is. All right, so what we're going to do to configure this. So what we're going to utilize is something that's known as process.env, and essentially it's an object that's going to contain our environment variables. An environment variable at its most simplistic definition is essentially a variable that's going to describe the environment our app is going to run in. So you can see why this is going to be important for Heroku, because Heroku is going to be in charge of our app's environment. So it's going to provide us some environment variables that we can apply to our application. And one of those is going to be process.env.port. Now, the biggest reason why we actually need to use Heroku's port number and not our own port number is because since our code is going to be hosted on Heroku, well, it's going to be in charge of directing our HTTP request to the correct port number. Hence why they need to be the one to assign that port number. So I'm going to say const port, and make sure you say this first. Say process.env.port, and then you can use an OR statement and just point out your original localhost port number. So in my case, it was 5000. And I'm just going to keep going down inside here, and I'm just going to change it. So this is going to be changed to port, and this one is also going to be changed to port. Okay, so awesome. And we also have another environment variables provided by Heroku, and it's something that's known as process.env.node.env. And essentially, this is going to indicate whether or not our application is in production or not. So it's going to either return production or it's going to return undefined. All right, so we're going to be using this to our benefits in order to determine when to actually serve static files. Okay, so I'm just going to go down here under my middleware, and I'm just going to simply say if process.env.node.env equals to production, well, then I'm just going to run this piece of block code inside here. So what exactly are we going to be running inside here when it comes to production? Well, what we're going to want to do is actually serve static content. Okay, so if you guys don't remember, essentially what I showed was that inside my client folder, what I had was this little build folder right here. And this build folder right here was actually created by something called npm run build. And it's going to contain all the static of our React application. So whatever our React application was, it's basically all the static content placed inside this build folder. So our goal is to actually aim for this index.html right inside here. Our goal is to aim for this index.html, so we're going to showcase this, and this is going to reveal our React application. So what we're going to be utilizing is something that's known as app.use express.static. Okay, so this is going to allow us to serve static content from a directory that we specified. Okay, and this is probably one of the most misunderstood lines because there's actually many ways to kind of work with express.static. So inside this parentheses over here is where I'm going to specify the location of this build folder. Okay, so remember I said there's many ways to do this, and the first one I'm going to show you is going to be a path or an absolute path. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take in a native Node.js module that's going to be called path. So I'm going to say const path is going to require two paths, so we don't need to npm install this, it's already here. And this path is going to allow us to work with directory paths, and in our case, we want to join directory paths together. So I'm going to go down here, and what I'm going to say is path.join, and what I want to join is a dir name. So I'll explain what this is real soon, and then I want to point at the client folder and the build folder. All right, so what exactly is this dir name over here? It'll make more sense if I console.log it. Okay, so this dir name, and I'll just get it popped up over here, is essentially the location where this index.js file is running in. So in this case, this index.js file is indeed running inside the PERN Heroku folder. Okay, so that's what this dir name is actually pointing to. So all I'm simply doing is I'm combining this line over here with client/build. So let me show you what this path is going to do. I'll just take this code and I'll just console.log it. And you're going to soon see that it's exactly the same, except now I'm adding /client and I'm adding /build. So now it's really going for that build folder over there. Okay, so some of you guys may still be a bit confused because you don't know what this code is doing still, right? Because we're not able to run it because it's in production. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this code and I'm going to put it outside so you can see what Heroku is going to do when it hits this code. So currently right now, if I go back in my application and let's say I go to localhost 5000, which is my RESTful API, you're going to see that everything seems to be plain. In fact, if I go to /todos, it's just going to reveal back information to me. Okay, so what I'm going to do is something going to be really interesting. I'm going to take this code. I'm just going to copy it and I'm going to put it outside, and you're going to see what exactly is happening with this express.static code. So because I'm pointing at this build folder, now if I actually refresh this right here into /, you're going to see that now I have my input to do application. Now this is actually not coming from my React application that's being turned on right now. This is actually being served from the build folder. This index.html is basically the static content coming from the build folder. In fact, I can even prove it to you guys a little bit more, the other static contents that we can use. Remember, we have this favicon.ico, so I can just simply go inside here and just try to get my favicon.ico, and you can see that I'm able to serve that because I went to the correct directory, which is the build folder. Okay, so just remember this express.static is going to be pointing at this build folder, and it's going to serve all the static contents from HTML to favicons to CSS to JavaScript, you name it. Whatever it is inside that build folder. All right, so hopefully that makes a little bit more sense. Okay, so let's kind of talk about some of the misunderstandings with express.statics. This is not the only way to do it. There's actually a lot of ways that people like to do instead. So I'm just going to comment this out and just show you guys the many methods of how this thing can be done. So sometimes people just like to simply say app.use and they'll say express.static, and they'll just basically just not even use path, and they'll just directly just say client/build. And surprisingly, for many of you guys, this is going to continue to still work. And the reason for that is because express.static is relative depending on where the node process is launched. So in our case, our node process, or our app.listen, is located inside the index.js file. So by relative, it's going to be inside the root directory. So since it's in the root directory, now it's going to go to client folder because we specified that, and then it's going to go to the build folder. And likewise, we can even just say // and that's going to work the same exact way. So our application is still going to continue to work. And also, just to kind of show you guys so you guys can understand the concept a little bit better, this right here is the same thing as this, as the other ones that I kept writing about. It's just because this thing is by default, so sometimes people don't even want to put this inside there. Okay, so that's why these things continue to work. So this is an absolute path right here that I just utilized in the beginning. Really what I want you guys to get is that there's just so many ways to utilize express.statics. There's just so many ways to point at this build folder. But just remember that your main focus is to hit that build folder when you're using express.static. All right, so yeah, that's pretty much all you have to do to configure our index.js. So in the next section, we're going to start configuring our db.js or whatever your pool is located at. So I'll see you guys in the next section. Okay, so time for us to start configuring our db.js or wherever our pool configuration is located at. Now, I just want to give you guys a little heads up that inside our index.js, don't forget to kind of comment this thing out because we actually do want to use a React application. All right, so setting this up is actually not that bad as you think it is. Okay, so what we're going to first do is we're going to install a library called .env, and essentially what this is going to allow us to do is hide all of our secret information so it doesn't get deployed with Heroku. Then I'm going to create a new file that's going to be called .env, and it's going to contain all of our configuration from here. So the first one is going to be called pguser, which is just going to be Postgres. Next is pgpassword, which is just going to equal to, come on, there we go, kthl 822. pghost, which is going to be localhost. And then pgport is 5432. And then we have our pg database, which is just going to equal to PERN stack. All right. Okay, so now we're just going to apply inside here, and since our library finished downloading, I'm just going to require that. And I'm just going to say .config, so now we can start utilizing our environment variables that we specified in this file. So I'm going to take away this direct configuration, and I'm just going to put it inside a variable that's going to be called const dev.config. Okay, so dev.config, representing development configuration, and I'm just going to put my stuff over here. And now I'm going to use my process.env environment variables so I don't have to hard code it. Okay, so I'm just going to put all of my data inside here now. All right, so we got our process.env.pg password, and oh dear, just change that really quick. And we have our process.env.pg host, and then finally we have our process.env.pg database, and don't forget the port, so that should be our last one, and there we go. Ooh, that was a long process, but there we go. That's our development configuration, and it will work the same exact ways if we decide to say dev.config. But the thing is that we don't want to just use the dev.config. We are going to eventually use a ternary operator that's going to determine whether or not it's in production or not, and if it does turn out to be in production, we're going to be using our production configuration. Okay, so this is going to look a little bit strange, but we are going to need to use something that's known as connection string. And it needs to be called connection string, and basically this indicates that this is the string that's going to connect to our Postgres database. And aside here, we're going to use another environment variable that's called process.env dot, and it's going to be called database underscore URL. Now some of you may be wondering, like, why are we using this when we never specified it in our .env? And the reason for this is that it's going to be coming from our Heroku add-on. So we're going to be using an Heroku add-on that's going to allow to connect us to a Postgres cloud service so we can utilize a Postgres database in our application. Okay, so let me show you what this thing is going to look like. When we actually get a Heroku add-on, which I'm going to show you guys real soon later on, we're going to reveal something like this. So I have my little application over here, which is this thing right here. And you can see over here that we had an add-on that's called Heroku Postgres. So this is our Postgres database. And if I head to my settings and I go down to reveal config vars, you're going to see something called database URL. And we didn't create this. This was actually created by Heroku themselves. And you can see right here that this is our connection string. Okay. So basically that's what our connection string looks like inside our code. And this is what it is right here. So now that we have this, now we are going to have to add some logic of what our configuration for pull should be. So I'm going to say production, or sorry, not production. I'm going to say process.env.node env. And if it turns out that we actually are in production, then right off the bat, I'm just going to use production config. But if it turns out we're not, then I'm just going to use dev config. Okay, so pretty straightforward, and yeah, that's pretty much all you have to do to set it all up, and everything seems to be working perfectly fine. Now, there's actually a second method of solving this, which I'll show you guys as well if you're interested. If you guys are already satisfied with this current position, then feel free to continue to move on. Anyway, the other way we can do it is going to look very similar to this method right here, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to comment this thing out over here, all right? And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to create a variable that's going to be called const dev config. And also what I'm going to do after that is I'm just going to take this connection string out. And I'm just going to take this out right there, and I'm just going to put this in the same line. Okay, so what we're going to be adding inside here is going to look very similar to what you guys saw inside this piece of code right here. So inside, I'm just going to simply say Postgres QL, and also don't forget to add like this little temp string over here. So Postgres QL : and it's going to say PG users. So it's going to be process.env.pg users, and this is going to be the equivalent setup for this code over here. So process.env.pg users, and then we have another colon that's going to specify the process.env.pg password. All right, so once we have that, we're going to say @ and we're going to specify the location, and it's going to be our host, which is going to be process.env.pg host. And then inside here, we're going to add another colon, which is going to be pointing at our process.env.pg port. And then finally, we're just going to point at our database. And this right here is going to be the same exact setup. So there we go. That's just another way of doing so. And inside here, the way how we're going to configure this, and you can see we have an error over here, is that's because we don't have the connection string. So inside here, I'm just going to simply say connection string. Make sure that this is going to be inside an object. So I'm just going to add my brackets inside here. And then there we go. So what is basically happening is that the connection string is going to equal either to production configuration or development configuration. So I'll just do Control S, and you're going to see that we shouldn't get no more errors. So awesome. Yeah, that's pretty much the setup what we're going to be doing for our db.js or whatever our pool is configured at. So what we're going to be doing in the next section is we're going to start writing instructions for Heroku inside our package.json. So I'll see you guys in the next section. Okay, so finally time for our package.json, and personally for me, this is my favorite part because it really makes you understand how Heroku is going to function, or the steps it takes to deploying our application. So it really all starts with the scripts over here, and there's certain scripts that Heroku will recognize and will understand how to deploy your application. So let's talk about them. So inside here, there's an order that Heroku actually runs your script. There's the Heroku pre-built script, there is the Heroku post-built script, and then there's the start script. Now, the Heroku prebuild script basically runs before dependencies are installed. Okay, so if it turns out that it already runs Heroku prebuild, or if it actually doesn't have a Heroku prebuild, then it will just go on to installing all the dependencies within the package.json. Then afterwards, then it's going to utilize something called Heroku post build, and this script, as usual, is going to run after dependencies are installed. And then after that, it's going to use the start script. So let me kind of give you guys the logic of this. Essentially, what we're going to first do is, of course, just install our dependencies for our server code. And then eventually, when we hit Heroku post build script, we're basically going to run npm run build to build that folder so we can get that static content already set up. And then we're going to start our server so we can start to serve static content from that build folder that we just created. Okay, so that's the order of it. So I'm just going to go inside here, and we're just going to set it all up. We're actually just going to be using 2 scripts, so I'll show you guys that really quick. So of course, the first script is going to be a start script, and it's going to just simply say node index.js. Okay, so this is going to start an application. But next, what we're going to be adding is, remember, a Heroku, and it's called post build. Okay, so remember, this Heroku post build is going to run before the start over here. So we can actually write some logic. Remember, this build folder is not going to be there by default. In fact, we actually have to run npm run build in order to actually get this build folder. So what I want to do is, because remember, this package.json is inside the root directory. So what I want to do is I want to cd into my client folder, and then I want to install all my packages, and then I want to run npm run build to create that build folder, and then I'll move on to starting my server. So let's just exactly run that same exact logic. I'm going to go inside here, I'm going to cd into my client, and afterwards I'm going to npm install all my packages, then I'm just going to run npm run build, and yeah, there we go. That's really how you're going to set up your scripts. And now Heroku is going to understand how you want it to get deployed, or at least what structure or order you want it to get deployed. Okay, so that's pretty much all we have to do for our package.json. Okay, so that's pretty much all the configurations we have to do in our server side. So in the next section, we're just going to do a tiny bit of configuring within our client code. So I'll see you guys in the next section. Alrighty, so time for us to do a little bit of configuration in our client code. So I'm just going to go inside here, and I'm going to go over to my src, and I'm going to go to my components and edit to do, and immediately you're going to see a problem. So right off the bat, it's aiming at http://localhost 5000. So this is going to work fine and dandy when it comes to my local environment, but if I send this in production, it's going to throw me an error, or at least I'm not going to get my data that I want. Okay, so we're going to be solving this issue for both our development and production environment by utilizing something that's known as a proxy. Okay, so why are we using a proxy? Really, a proxy is just going to make it much more easier for us to just shorten our URL when it comes to development, but proxy is going to help us with our production as well, because when we send our application to a production, the proxy is going to be ignored, and by default, since we're going to be leaving it like this, it's going to be using the Heroku domain. So again, I'll explain what that exactly means, but let's actually first break it down to how this is going to help us in development. So inside here, if you guys are already tired of consistently keep saying http://localhost 5000, we're going to be using a proxy for that. So I'm going to go down here to my package.json in my client folder, go to the bottom, and I'm just going to add a proxy inside. So http://localhost, so I'm just going to be pointing at my server code. All right, that looks good to me. And now what I'm going to do is just go back into my edit to-dos, and I'll just delete all of these things, right? It's just going to make it shorter for us to make our life so much more easier. Oops. Uh-oh, there we go. And I think that's the last one inside there, so I'll go to my input to do now, and I'll delete this as well. Okay. And then I'm just going to go inside my list to-dos, and I believe I have 2 URLs inside here, so there's one of them. And then I have another one which is down here. All right, so yeah, that's going to shorten our application. Okay, so let's actually see if this is going to work for us, and you're going to soon see an error that we're going to soon face. So, you know, we basically add a proxy. This is going to shorten it, but if I go back in my application, and this is a super common problem, so if I go back into my localhost 3000, wait a minute, you're starting to notice that I actually don't have my application showing. So what on earth is happening? So I'm going to go back into my application, and I'm going to go into my input to do, and I'm just going to add a comment out of this. So I'm just going to change to the comment so I can kind of debug what exactly is happening. So I'm just going to open my console right here, and I'm just going to go over to here, and I'm going to clear this. And if I decide to say like maybe something random like hi, whoa, what is this? It says http://localhost 3000/todos does not exist. But wait a minute, didn't we just add a proxy that was aiming for localhost 5000? And the biggest reason why these problems occurs, and probably some of you guys already face this problem a lot of times, where you go to your proxies and you add one, but it still continues to focus on your 3000. And the reason for that is because we still have cache. So we need to actually reset that cache, and there's actually steps to actually solving this issue. So what you're going to first want to do is you're going to need to delete your node modules folder and your package.json folder. And once you delete that, I want you guys to install all the dependencies back into your React application in the client folder, then turn your React application off and turn it back on, and that should reset your cache, and then you're going to see your proxy is going to start to work. Okay, so I'm just going to do that real quick, and I'll meet you guys real soon. Alrighty, so what I did was I deleted my node modules, including my package.log.json, and then I just npm installed all my dependencies back in my React application, and then I turned on and off my React terminal, and that right there just cleared my cache. So you can see now that my application seems to be working perfectly fine. So again, I just want to repeat this because I know this is a super common problem. The biggest reason why this thing is still pointing at localhost 3000 is because we still have cache, so we need to actually reset it. So just by resetting it just means that you just have to delete your node modules, delete your package-log.json, just install everything back inside there again, and just turn on and off your React terminal, and everything should work perfectly fine, and you're going to see your proxy start to function properly. All right, so let's go back into configuration. All right, so honestly, really, just by setting this proxy, we already have completed both our development and our production environment, okay? And let me explain why. And I also have notes if you guys are really interested inside here. So essentially the thing is that when this proxy right here is only going to be working inside development. So when it goes into production, it's going to ignore this proxy. So currently at the moment, if we actually put this in production, it's going to actually ignore this http://localhost 5000, so it's just going to leave it like this. And if nothing is going to be specified, then by default, it's going to be using the Heroku domain. So what it's going to look like when it's deployed to Heroku is something like this, okay? This PERN todo app-demo.heroku.com/todos. Okay, so that's what it looks like inside there. So this is going to help us keep it dynamic just by ignoring that proxy when we head to production. Now, I just want to remind you guys again that just remember that Heroku app over here, it's really just our build folder being served with its static contents along with the RESTful API. So if I'm just going to /todos over here, I'm just really just getting all my to-dos, like that welcome you just saw in the first page. All right, so everything is set up properly for both our server and our client side. So what we're going to be doing in our final section is we're going to add a Heroku add-on, and we're going to get ready for deployment. So I'll see you guys in the next section. All right, so our application is pretty much ready to get deployed. There's just two things I really want to talk about. One that's actually not very important. It's just kind of a nice to have. But the second one is actually quite important. Not particularly for this project, but just in case you actually do any other PERN application. So I'm going to go inside my package.json, and you'll notice that I just have my scripts over here. But there's also something extra that we should add, which is an engines, okay? And essentially what this engine is going to do is it's going to determine what type of version or node or npm we're using for this application. So in my case, when I built this application, my node version was about 10.14.2, okay? So if I believe it or not, I think the newest version of node is like around 12 to 13. Okay, so the thing about this is that I actually should specify it inside this engine, right? Because the thing is that if I don't specify what version of node I'm using, well then by default Heroku is going to be using 12. And this is an actual situation that can happen. Maybe 12 or version 12 node has a breaking change, and it probably might break my application. So what I want to say to Heroku is, hey, just actually use the version of node that I use to build this application so we can make sure that nothing breaks in my application. Okay, so I'm going to go inside here, and I'm just going to simply say my node inside here, and I'll just put my version is 10.14.2. Okay, and inside here I'm also going to specify my npm version, And for that one, it is going to be 6.14.2. All right, so I'm just going to go inside here, and I'm just going to put inside here 6.14.2. All right, so that's pretty much the important part over here. Now, the unimportant one that's actually nice to have is actually something that's known as a catch-all method. Okay, so I'm going to go inside here. I actually forgot to mention this, but it's really not going to kill your application if you don't have it. So currently at the moment, and I'll just kind of show it to you guys so I'll make a little bit more sense. I'm just going to comment this out so you guys can see what's happening. So let me give you guys the scenario if this application was inside Heroku. Right, so the application is going to work perfectly fine. Remember, we're basically going to get static contents from a build folder, and it's going to show all of our data. Everything's going to work perfectly fine. And my RESTful API is going to still continue to work. But let's say that I decide to go to something that was extremely random. Let's say I decide to say something like goop or something. And right there, it's going to give me this nasty looking error. This is actually not very user-friendly, so there's actually a way to actually prevent these type of things from showing up. So this goop over here is not a route that we actually define, right? The only routes that we pretty much defined was the slash to-dos, the slash, all these other routes that we created inside here. These were the only routes that we created, but what we did was do /goop, and our server just didn't recognize that. So this is why it's important to actually utilize something that's known as a catch-all method, okay? So our catch-all method is actually going to appear at the bottom, okay? So what I'm going to say, it has to be in the bottom for a big reason because it's going to catch anything that's not any of these routes defined. So I'm going to say app.get, and I'm going to say star, indicating get everything else besides these things. And I'm going to do res, so request.response. And inside here, I'm going to say res.send file. So I'm going to be sending a file if they decide to go something random. And this is going to look really recognizable to what we did in express.static. I'm going to say path.join. Path.join. So I'm going to be serving a file and I'm going to point towards it. I'm going to say path.join dir name. So hopefully this is starting to look very familiar. And I want to actually serve the client /build, and as you guessed it, index.html page. So if they go anywhere else, if they go for goop, if they go for something like super random, it's going to continue to point them to the index.html page, which is going to be that to-do list. So let's see what's going to happen now. Now, if I refresh this, you're going to see that it points back inside here. If I decide to say, you are good today, I don't know, you're going to see that it continues to go over there. And of course, if I go to /todos, everything's going to continue to work perfectly fine. Okay, so those are just some extra things to add. Like I said, it's not going to kill our application. We deployed it, but I figured that it was actually quite important that I had to talk to you guys about this engine thing. All right, so finally, now in the next section, we are going to start using Heroku and deploying this application. So I'll see you guys in the next section. All right, so as you can see over here, we already configured our client and our server code. And so what's going to be next is now we're going to deploy our app to Heroku. So first of all, we have to make sure that we have a .git folder inside our root directory. So again, you can check by doing ls-a to see our hidden folders as well. And indeed, we do have a .git inside here. All right, and also the next thing we want to do is we want to make sure we put all the folders or files that we don't want to actually be pushed to Heroku inside our .git-ignore. So our client seems to look good. We also need to get rid of this .env to hide our secret information. So I'm just going to simply go inside here and just say .env. All right, and it should hide it. And it doesn't seem to, and I think I already know what the problem is. So I accidentally did git add and git commit this .env file, so it's currently in my .git repository. So I actually need to take it out and then put inside my .git-ignore. So let's actually do that really quick. And this is a neat trick if you want to follow along too. Probably because they're not facing the same issue as me. But I'm going to just simply say git remove -- cached, and I'm going to specify that's the .env folder. And by doing so, it's going to remove it from my Git repository. And now I can just simply add inside here and just simply say git add, git commit. And you guys can personally just say ready for deployment because everything is good to go. Ready for deployment. All right, there we go. Okay, so now that everything is all ready and set up and ready to go, what we're going to do next is we're going to start applying Heroku. So I'm going to first do Heroku login. So we always have to log in first before we can access it. And I'm going to press G, so you can press any key to get inside here. And I am just going to log in. Usually it's pretty quick, and now I can just go back. You can see that I'm logged into the system now. Okay, so straight off the bat, I'm going to do something called Heroku create, and essentially this is going to create an empty application for me to put my code inside. And I can even pick a name for this. So in my case, I'm just going to simply call it PERN deploy tutorial. Okay, so hopefully no one took this name. And yep, okay, cool. There we go. So nice. So now I actually have this empty application that I can put my code inside here now. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add an add-on to this. Okay, so remember how I kept talking about add-ons. Just to refresh your brain a little bit, if you guys remember inside here, I had this little add-on called Heroku Postgres, which was basically a cloud service or Postgres cloud service that our application can utilize. So how are we going to add that? It's actually very simple. I'm just going to say Heroku add-ons. Okay, and I'm going to say create. And what I'm going to put inside here is called Heroku Postgres, because remember that's what it was called, PostgreSQL. And then we're going to take the free version, so I'm going to simply say hobby-dev. Okay, so I'm just going to click on this thing, and also I have to specify the app that I want to push it into, so I'll do -a, and I'm just going to simply point it at PERN deploy tutorial. Okay, so now if I click enter, you're going to see that it's going to add a database inside there. So it says create Heroku Postgres, and everything is working perfectly fine, and we even get a name for this. Okay, so remember how we were able to access our PSQL terminal when we were messing with Postgres? So for example, if I went to PSQL-U, I basically went inside my PSQL terminal. Well, we can actually access that same exact way with Heroku. So what you can simply do is just simply say Heroku and say PSQL, and then you want to specify the app, so -a, and our app is called PERN deploy, and of course this depends on what name you have. And if I click enter, you're going to see that now we get to go inside our PSQL terminal. See, it says connect to Postgres crystalline 53804. Okay, so it's the same exact one. And look at this, we're inside here. And this should actually look very familiar. Remember, if I do /dt, it currently says I don't have any relationship. So you can see we're currently inside our database called PERN deploy tutorials. So pretty epic, okay? And I believe if I go inside my application right now, so let's go there right now, and I'll just go inside here, and I called the PERN deploy tutorial. There it is. And if I go to my setting now, because I added that add-on, it should pop up inside there. So nice. So this is where our process.env.database URL is going to access it, okay? Okay, so I'm going to go back inside here. And so there's actually many ways to put your tables and data inside here. We're not going to create a database because it's already been created for us, so we can comment this thing out. But we are going to need to create a table. So I'm going to take this data, and I can just simply copy and paste it inside there. And voila, I create a table, and I do /dt. And you can see that we indeed do have a to-do table, and yeah, that's pretty much all you have to do. Now, of course, by all means, there's actually a lot of ways to do this, so I'll just show you guys another alternative way. Let's say you have a lot of tables and you don't want to simply copy and paste all of them. So what we can utilize is a few commands from the terminal. So I'm actually going to delete this, so I'm going to say drop table to do. Okay, and you can see if I do /dt, I have nothing, no more. So I'm going to do Control Q. So I'm going to get out of here. Oh no, okay, I don't know what just happened. Uh-oh, okay. I'm just going to go out of here. I'm just going to quit out of here. So /Q. And now I'm out of this thing right here. And there's actually another way to actually do this. So what I'm going to be utilizing is something that's known as a cat command. And it's probably one of the most common commands used by a lot of people. But it actually stands for concatenate. And it actually has a lot of things I can do. What we're going to be personally using it for is being able to display all the contents from a file. So let me show you for example. If I say cat and I say database.sql, well, look at this. It's going to reveal everything that's from this file. And likewise, let's say I decide to do cat.env. Well, then it's going to reveal all of these things from here. So it's going to actually showcase all the contents from my files. And we can actually utilize this for our benefits. So I'm going to simply say cat, and I'm going to say database.sql. Okay, so now I'm going to basically print, all the outputs from that file, and I'm going to be using something that's known as a pipe. Okay, and this pipe is basically going to take the output from here, and it's going to add it to the second command in here. So this one is going to look very familiar. It's going to be Heroku pgpsql, and we're going to specify the app. Remember, it's going to be PERN deploy tutorial. So this code looks really weird, okay? But you're going to see that it's going to create a table for us. Okay, so it's basically printing all the output from database.sql, and then it's going to put it inside our app. So you can see right here that it created a table. Okay, so this is basically just a lot of commands put together. This is called pipe, this is called cat. And essentially what we're doing right here is that we are basically printing all of the contents from this database.sql, and with that output, we put it inside here with our second command. So this pipe is basically kind of connecting these things together. Okay, so just a little bit of lessons of some of the commands that you might see in the future. All right, but that's just another way of doing it instead of just copy and pasting. Okay, so we created our table. So yes, there we go. All we're going to do next is we're just going to push it up there. So I'm just going to do this one more time, and it seems like I have changed the file. I do not know what I changed. Oh, I guess I changed this thing. No matter what it is, just say git add, again, git commit, and I'm just going to say change or comment and database.sql. All right, so now that we're all good for this thing, now we just have to align our remote with the Heroku's remote URL. So what I'm going to simply say is say Heroku get remote, and the app that I'm trying to actually connect with is going to be called PERN deploy tutorial. So this is what you named it as. And if I click enter, it's going to connect with each other. Okay, you can see that it's set the remote. And now, since everything is all connected and ready to go, I can just simply say git push Heroku master. And voila, there we go. That's all it is. So I'll get back to you guys real soon once this thing finishes loading. Okay, you guys, so our code should be finished pushing into Heroku. So all we can do is just simply say Heroku open. Now, I do want to mention something later on, but you're going to see that our application works perfectly fine. So I'll just open this thing up and show you guys real quick. So I already tested it around, and you can see that our data seems to be working perfectly fine. So some of you guys actually might face this problem where when you're adding something, it doesn't seem to be refreshing. Like for example, if you click add, you're not going to be seeing any changes because it doesn't refresh. And the biggest problem with that isn't because of like your deployment error. It was mainly because I forgot to uncomment this window.location. So if you go back into your components input to do, and you go over to windows.location equals to slash, just make sure you uncomment it, and then git add, git push, and just basically push it back into Heroku by saying git push Heroku master. All right, so yeah, congratulations you guys for deploying your PERN stack application. Okay, so what should we guys do from now? Well, if you guys are continuing to face errors, I'm going to actually push my final code like this one into GitHub so you guys can actually practice with it, or just kind of compare your codes with my codes. And also, I highly suggest, like I said again, if you're having some problems deploying your own PERN application, I suggest you guys first deploy this app first, so my PERN app to do, just to make sure we're on the same page. And also, if you face errors, you can always use my code in this video as reference. So anyway, congratulations to you guys, and hope to see you guys next time.